Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our first artist talk in conjunction with mediations in the Hicks Art Center Gallery. My name is Clifford Eberly, and I am the exhibitions associate here in the Hicks Art Center Gallery, where I am sitting amongst Casey Kauffmann's videos. It gives me great joy to introduce Casey Kauffmann to you today. Casey is an interdisciplinary artist working in drawing, installation, video, and a variety of digital mediums. She is a lecturer at the University of California, San Diego. Kauffmann was born in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, California in 1989, and she lives and works in Oceanside, California, and received her MFA from the University of Southern California in 2020, and her Bachelor of Arts from the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Her work has been featured in publications such as ArtNet, Artillery, LA Weekly, The New Yorker, IB Vice, and Hyperallergic. She has exhibited her work nationally and internationally in galleries such as Transfer Gallery, Centro de Cultura Digital, the Brand Library in Glenside, Lyles and King, Coaxial, Arbite, Cirrus, and more. Kauffmann's collage Instagram project at Uncanny SF Valley, which she started in 2014, features digital collage works and GIFs created using only her phone. The pieces Kauffmann posts to this account are an ever-accumulating collection of material from all corners of the internet, sourced from Tumblr, Instagram, and Google. This Instagram account and body of work has been exhibited in many galleries, written about in several esteemed publications, and led to her admission to the MFA program at the University of Southern California. Kauffmann's drawing practice functions as an inquiry into the representation of femme emotion and hysteria in both art history and popular culture. And with that, I hand it over to Casey. Welcome, Casey, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you so much for inviting me and including me in this awesome exhibition. It's great to be here with all of you. I'm gonna set my timer because brevity is not my strength, and I can watch it and make sure I don't go over. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can do a little PowerPoint. Oh, I gotta open my system preferences. Hang tight. Let's see. Okay, 1 second. It's all happening. Privacy. Here we go. Oh my goodness. Okay, hopefully that works. Let's see. Okay, great. It's all happening. It might not be able to record my screen, but it'll hear me talking. Is that okay, Cliff? Because it says I have to quit if I want to have the screen recorded. I'm so sorry. We're just going to deny this and go ahead. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. You'd think being a digital artist, I would just have this all down pat, but you know, so it goes. Okay, so like Cliff said, my name is Casey Kauffmann. My pronoun are she, hers. And I'm a visual arts professor at UCSD, and I got my MFA from USC and my Bachelor of Arts from the Evergreen State College in Washington. And I'm from the Valley in Los Angeles. So yeah, I like to really just start at the beginning. So I went to like Evergreen for my bachelor's degree, and it was very much like hippie school. No grades, no tests, just feelings. And everybody was, you know, painting trees and going to drum circles. But this really kind of defined who I was as an artist. I thought I was a hippie, and then I just realized that I'm a real LA girl. So I was in a drawing class, and we got this assignment to make a work of art about grief. And, you know, people were pulling from current events and from their own personal lives. And I have always been really obsessed with reality television. I've seen every episode of Housewives, every city, every franchise. So this has always been an interest of mine. And when I thought of grief, I thought of Kim Kardashian crying. So I sourced all of these images of women from reality television, sort of in hyper emotional states. And I did transfers of those images onto one sheet of paper. And this to me is like a very important piece in me realizing how my sense of humor works in art and putting it all together. And I think that that interest also really comes from the fact that, like I said, I was born in the Valley. My dad worked for Mattel, so made Barbie commercials my whole life. And I have 3 sisters. So a lot of femme influence my entire life, including my mom also, who was a pageant queen. So yeah, I made this piece, and it was just sort of an aha moment. I'll kind of go through some of those for me. And after making this piece, I really got interested in honing in on those expressions of what visual culture often calls hysteria, especially, you know, in relation to women. So I really wanted to hone in on these expressions within the media and visual culture. And these are all charcoal drawings that I was doing after that piece. And again, this kind of sets in for me my sense of humor and how that relates to, you know, not only what I find funny, but also what I find tragic and painful, especially consuming this culture my entire life. And in this journey of, you know, investigating these, you know, gestures of emotion from women, I got really into a website that you may have heard of called Tumblr. And Tumblr is, you know, somewhat similar to Instagram. And at the time that I was interested in Tumblr, there were no parental guidelines. So there was just, it was a free-for-all of crazy images from all over the internet. And I was really collecting a lot of these images, and I really didn't know what I was going to do with them. I just knew that one day it would become a part of my work. So I was collecting images and archiving them. And at this time, I had moved back with my folks to LA. I didn't have a computer, didn't know how to use Photoshop, but was definitely interested in digital art. So I started making these collages inside of my scanner. And that just meant printing out images, literally printing from my collection of images from Tumblr and putting them together with objects on the scanner bed. And this was my first foray into collage, which really is the defining technical process of my practice. And what's great about collage is that, you know, it's movable. That's why I like drawing over painting. You know, I like to erase. I know that drawing teachers don't like that, but I like to be able to, you know, make changes as I go. And collage really provides for that, especially when you're doing it in a scanner bed, because it's literally physically movable as you take the picture. Nothing's really glued down. So yeah, I think that these works are really a precursor to my practice today, because it is a combination of physical objects and digital relics, just physicalized. So again, at the time, you know, I was really trying to get into the art world in LA. I had met some people, and I was interested in getting into digital art, but didn't have a computer, no experience with Photoshop. But what I did have was a smartphone. And on my personal account, I posted this image because I was going out too much, smoking lots of cigarettes, and I got strep throat and I went to the hospital. And I took this picture and I added some cats and some sparkles. And for me, this was a way for me to garner sympathy while still making a joke with that distance that social media kind of provides for users. And again, this was like an aha moment. I really consider this my first digital collage, and people loved it and thought it was hilarious. And, you know, what you'll find in me talking about my work is that I'm a unabashed validation seeker. So making people laugh and, you know, connecting with lots of people through Instagram was really satisfying for me in a way that like I couldn't really do with drawing. It's much more fast paced and it's much more direct to viewers. So once I did this, I got the ball rolling on my Instagram account, which Cliff mentioned in my bio. So Uncanny SF Valley was started in 2014. And it, you know, it has multiple purposes in the beginning, but a huge part of it was me trying to connect with other artists in the LA art scene. And I also, just coming from that cat collage, I really came to understand how important it was to me to be able to talk about these deep or difficult issues while having a sense of humor. And I think that the internet really provides for that. So the collages that are on Uncanny SF Valley to this day are made entirely using a smartphone, so using my iPhone. And in the beginning, I was, you know, just using an app called Cyber FM, which was like a very Tumblr teen kind of app that had all these like vaporwave stickers and stuff. And it was very sort of like rudimentary, but I was downloading all of my images off of Tumblr onto my phone. I could make my collages on the go. I didn't have to buy studio space. I didn't have to learn Photoshop. There was something really accessible and rewarding about having this ability to make artwork just in my hand. So I started to post every single day just to try to gain a following. And as I was, you know, making these collages, these themes started coming up for me because I think something that is not talked about enough in art school is that, like, you know, a lot of times professors want us to justify our projects before they, you know, come about. But I think that a lot of time hindsight is how we figure out the meaning behind our work. And looking back as I was creating, I was realizing all of the themes that were important to me. So it's not like it was all planned out. It was sort of intuitive until it wasn't, you know? So because I was trying to connect with other people in the art world, one of the main themes that came up in the beginning was validation seeking. And I really believe that the world would be a better place if we were all just a little bit more honest about our desires. And I think that validation seeking is kind of the whole reason that social media exists. And I think that it has a very negative connotation to it, especially when it is aligned with themes of femininity. It's sort of associated with ideas of manipulation, but I think that is a very base part of human consciousness to want to see and be seen and to be understood and to understand others. So I was really honest about my need for validation and wanting to be looked at and understood. So that was like a major theme that came up with Uncanny SF Valley in the beginning. And then obviously another big theme for me, which started with that early piece, is the representation of femme-identifying people. So the themes also come from what I am collecting on Tumblr. And I, you know, noticed this pattern of femme representation that, you know, was both celebratory and critical when I put these images together. That's a big thing for me, is that, you know, I think it's important to have a critical eye, but I also think that the way women are represented online is through a critical lens. So a lot of this humor is where the celebration comes in for me. And obviously I am up against community guidelines when I'm using social media and Instagram as a, foray for and the platform for sharing this work. And often, viewers and followers will comment about some of the work that I'm sharing and how it might be lewd or difficult to look at. But what is interesting about being a collage artist is that I didn't make any of this. I'm just putting it together and showing it to you. And when you put things together, new meanings arise, and a lot of the onus on, feelings about it go on to the viewer. So if you find it problematic, it's an opportunity to question your own perception of the view you have of women. And another thing when it comes to femme representation is an aesthetic that holds true for me for as long as I've had this practice is very sort of like Lisa Frank, sparkly, things that are associated with ideas of something being surface or frivolous, because I think often that is the way that women are perceived. And again, if you look at my work and you see something that's pink and sparkly and you automatically reject it as being sort of superfluous, that says more about you as a viewer than it does about me as a maker. So it's really interesting to me to see who looks at this and sort of rejects it, and who looks at it and finds it incredibly validating and rewarding, and it makes them feel seen. Especially in my early work, a lot of times I would have more teenagers reaching out to me and be like, this is me, this is about my life, which that's my favorite kind of viewer, because, it's very difficult to feel seen at that age. And so, yeah, I think that it's market research really to find who identifies with this kind of aesthetic and who rejects it. So something that holds true for me is that Lisa Frank aesthetic. And obviously that also has to do with the way that I grew up. I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, which is when social media became popular. And it's also when reality TV became popular. And it's also the period of Lisa Frank, of Britney Spears, of this particular aesthetic that, again, just holds super true to me beyond a state of nostalgia. So femme representation is a theme throughout all stretches of my practice, which include drawing. And the real important realization I had much later on is how the technical process of what I was doing, aligned with the conceptual intent. So if I really think about what collage is taking things that already exist, rearranging them to make new meaning, which I kind of feel like the entire internet is a collage. If you think about your timeline, if you scroll through a timeline, it is a seemingly random assortment of images that are presented to you. And new meanings are created with that order. And the interesting thing about those timelines, though, is that they're algorithmically controlled. So there's a corporate entity that is feeding you this imagery. But I think that something to take away from this work is that collage is just a recreation of something new. It's the creation of something new from things that already exist, and they produce new meanings. And also that those meanings become movable for the viewer. So that was a really important realization for me. And if you look at my entire feed, which has maybe over 1,000 collages at this point, there is a sort of very clear, compositional pattern that occurs in my work. If you look, most of these collages, the viewer's eye enters at the bottom left-hand corner and sort of moves throughout the picture in this zigzag pattern. And that is my interest in filling the space. I am absolutely a maximalist, if nothing else. And I want to make sure that the viewer has something to look at in every sort of area. So yeah, thinking about how collage is related to the internet and how collage produces new meanings through the relationships that are presented. And that is something that Uncanny SF Valley does. So with this work, I was showing it mostly digitally. And what's interesting about, showing things on Instagram is it's a one-to-one relationship. Like, I look at it on my phone and I'm the only person who can look at it. It's, it's not a giant Rothko where multiple people can look at it at the same time. So once this account sort of started to get interest, I had to think about, how do I physicalize this work? And this is a big question for digital artists. How do you physicalize not only the imagery, but the experience of consuming this work digitally? So I started to think about how to show this work in galleries and show them in different spaces. And early on, I was showing at very like DIY kinds of parties and galleries and bars and stuff. And I would invite people who were at the shows to come and participate in, what I called selfie booths, where people would take a selfie stick and, stand in the light of the projections of some of my pieces, or I would have them do some kind of action and I would turn it into a GIF. And that was sort of to recreate the social interaction that Uncanny SF Valley allowed for. Because I wanted to not only bring the images to the space, I wanted to bring the engagement and the participation to the physical space as well. And then it brought them back to the digital space of the Instagram when I tagged them in it. I'm like, here's your GIF, So it created some really fun sort of participatory kind of performative works that I got to share and create together with people. So that was one way to physicalize this work. Another way, some objects that I've created, if I do a print of these pieces, it's always on an acrylic block. And that is because I would never do a paper print of one of these images. Because it doesn't refer to the, where it comes from. It doesn't refer to the sort of like screen catalyst of these works. So these acrylic blocks, if you turn them to the side, they have this very nice sort of luminous quality, and I find them to be really screen referential. So often if I'm showing objects of these collages, they are shown in this kind of format of an acrylic block. Another way that I've shown this work is printed onto silk. So this piece is called The User's Present, and it's a very long collage made for this, inkjet ready piece of silk. And if you look at the ends, it has these dowels on the ends that are like shiny and sparkly. And it's meant to be a sort of play on the idea of a scroll, because you're scrolling through your phone and it looks like a scroll. But also I thought that the silk was a really nice reference to the digital file. It's ephemeral. It's almost not even an object. It's so thin. The light passes through it as it would pass through a screen. So I thought that the silk was a really great way to physicalize this work as well. Now this piece was called External Hard Drive. And I talked about it as though it was like an external hard drive, like an external place to hold my feelings outside of my body or outside of my Instagram. So all of the images that were printed on the ceiling of the piece were very femme specific images that came from my Instagram account, those collages. And then I also at night would project them through what was actually a shower curtain, so that it just looked like this luminous digital box that cycled through all of these pieces. So it's a really fun physicalizing way for someone to like step into my Instagram. As you can see, there's a cat right there. She stepped right in. So yeah, that's External Hard Drive. And this is probably my most successful way that I've physicalized this work. So in 2019, I was invited to be in the show called Valley Girl Redefined at the Brand Library in Glendale. And I made this piece, which is 300 of my collages printed on a giant piece of PVC. And then back mounted on that PVC are 3 small iPads that would cycle through some of the GIFs that I have going on. So it would give this sort of animated quality. And this piece is kind of like my ideal way of bringing the Instagram to life, because so many people could stand in front of it and they could have this group experience where they see things that they understand within the collages and they're like, oh, do you know that show? Or like, oh, do you know that character? Oh, I love that meme, which is like such a shared sort of group experience that we engage with online with people we've never met, our friends. So I really got to sort of see this thing that happens in a non-physical form in physical real life action. So again, I encourage any digital artists out there to really think beyond making the image physical and thinking about, how do I make the actual engagement physical? You know, how do I bring the interaction into the space? That's something that I always try to think about when I'm bringing this work into galleries. So that was in 2019, and in 2018, I had kind of felt like Uncanny SF Valley had sort of reached this plateau. I wanted to expand on this work conceptually, and I wanted to see where I could take this work into the future. And I wanted to also understand how I could relate this digital practice to my drawing practice. And that's when I got into USC. So when I was in grad school, I was really thinking about how to expand this into the future, reach more people, and relate my drawing practice to this work. So my thesis show at USC, which by the way, I graduated in 2020, so nobody got to go. But that's okay, because I've gotten to show the work since. So I had my thesis show in 2020. It was called Who Do You Think You Are? I Am, which is a reference to a viral video of this guy playing, he's bowling. But I just thought the phrase, who do you think you are, I am, was just like the most internet thing I'd ever heard in my life. So within the show, there were a few pieces that kind of expanded upon what I was already doing. One of the best and biggest ways was this piece that I created called Knowing Others and Wanting to Be Known. So this piece is a long video, but it is made of episodic narratives strung together. And the whole point of this video is that I can continue adding episodes infinitely into the future. I would love if one day the video piece was like 5 hours long. Right now it's at like 18 minutes and 30 seconds. But each one of the narratives are about 30 seconds to 1 minute long, and they're kind of strung together. They have their relationships, but some of them are kind of separate. So the point of that is so that if someone walks in the room and they want to watch it for 30 seconds, they're still going to get something from it. Or if they want to sit down on these custom bean bags I made for the show, they can sort of have a binge watching experience like you would on YouTube, of a sort of infinite timeline. And this video collage was created on After Effects. And a huge reason why I started working in video is because when I brought the collages of Uncanny SF Valley to grad school, a lot of my faculty sort of cited generational difference in their inability to access the work. And I wanted to give this work movement, time, and voice to sort of clarify what my interests were. And I found that by making video and having literal voice given to these collages, literal movement, it allowed more people to sort of access meaning. And I don't know if you can tell by the aesthetics of my work or by the way I make it, but accessibility is supremely important to me. But yeah, so this piece hopefully will continue into the future. And the episodes are, really fun and address a multitude of subject matters. And then in my thesis show, I included this series called Who Is She? So these are all drawings. They're done with chalk and oil pastel, and they're also turned into GIFs. And this was kind of the moment where I was able to relate my drawing practice to my digital practice. The way that these pieces worked would be, I don't know if you recall, but I showed these drawings of women in sort of hysterical emotion previously. And I decided rather than doing the whole face, I would really hone in, focus in on that height of drama, that sort of crescendo of the moment. And so these come from both art history and popular culture. So like in this bottom left-hand corner, that's Kim Kardashian, but we also have Susanna and the Elders by Rubens. So I will take a cropped image of that height of expression within the face of the woman or the body, and I'll scan it in, and then I will liquefy it in Photoshop. So I'll stretch and pull to kind of increase that emotion and increase that hysteria. And this tool, Liquefy, this is generally used to make women's breasts bigger or make their eyes bigger. So that's also something I really appreciate, the ability to misuse the tool. So I kind of increase that feeling and that emotion just by pushing and pulling the face. So I will scan that drawing, or I will print that image, then I will draw it. Then I'll scan the drawing and I'll add another layer of digitization through that liquefy movement. So again, I'm also really interested in infinite processes. I mean, you could take this to the point of abstraction between drawing, liquefy, and scan, and back and forth. So after that, I decided that it would be great to add sort of another digital element, since these were the drawn versions. And these digital, if you look right here, these are all GIFs of the scanned drawings. And this is just using really simple apps on my phone to sort of add these liquefied effects so they kind of move and undulate. And people would look at them and tell me they could almost imagine the screaming, which, you know, I love that. But they kind of just like move through what feels like a physicalized space. And it also is referencing the touch of my mouse that creates the liquefaction, and the touch of my finger on my phone. I don't know, can you guys see my mouse? Mm-hmm. Okay, so like right here, you can see this line. That's my finger pulling through the image, and it kind of creates this ripple effect. So again, all of this work is kind of talking about the very literal relationship between physical touch and, physical touch and physical drawing to digital practices. So yeah, this was my expansion of my drawing practice and its relationship to digital practices. So that was my thesis show. And then after that, I was invited to participate in an NFT program. And I showed a bunch of my collages from Uncanny SF Valley in this virtual reality space. I also curated a bunch of musicians and video artists to have screenings of their works. You can see them right here. And it was like Uncanny SF Valley Volume 1. So it was like my early Uncanny SF Valley collages. And I mentioned this because, you know, the internet is sort of changing. When you think about the internet in terms of social media, that's called Web 2, and we're kind of moving into Web 3. Web 2 is us engaging with corporatized platforms and, you know, talking to one another, but still being sort of mediated by a corporate entity and what we're allowed to say and how we say it. But in Web 3, you know, the ideal utopic vision of that is a co-created online experience, which is what the blockchain is, which is what, cryptocurrency exchange is. And I think for me, this was a really cool opportunity to sort of participate in a space that this work wasn't necessarily created for. But I will say that I think a lot about like, how do I show this work in a way that feels authentic to it? And seeing it in a virtual reality space, having people from across the world attend my opening, and be able to fly around with these silly little wings and talk to each other and look at it in a real digital space was super gratifying and rewarding. I didn't make any money off the NFTs, but this part was fun. I kind of hit it at the wrong time, and I can talk about that if we do have time for questions, but I have a lot to say about NFTs. And when I was creating this NFT work, that is when I came to make the work that is in mediations. So to participate in the show that I was in, I needed Oculus, right? Which is a $300 virtual reality rig, which was created by Meta or Facebook. And, you know, I didn't have a lot of money, but they were like, you're going to make so much money off these NFTs. I was like, cool, it's an investment. And then when people were attending the space, there was a real lack of understanding of how to operate things. And it makes me think about how the internet and new platforms that arise on the internet sort of boast a utopic democratization, you know, the ability for people to connect and unite. But then again, there is this fetishism towards technology that is inaccessible. There is this fetishism towards processes that are intellectually inaccessible. Things like Photoshop, you know, they're supposed to make our lives easier, but they're not exactly the most user-friendly experience. And it takes a lot of time to access that knowledge. So both ideologically and, you know, through these technologies, digital art can often be a just very elitist game that is difficult to access, you know? So techno fetishism, these pieces were made to just sort of talk about the difficulty in accessing these technologies, though they are kind of meant to unite us all. And the funny thing about it is these were all made with silly little apps on my phone, just downloading pictures, you know? So I hold space for both sides. I mean, my experience of digital art is it has been really accessible. I don't pay for a studio space. You know, people say I want a studio visit. I say, here's my phone, go ahead, you know? So there is this ease with which a lot of this work can be created. I mean, I could literally do a 10-minute talk on how I made these. You could probably go out and make them yourself. But then again, these technologies and the constant updating and the planned obsolescence of all of this technology sort of makes it very inaccessible and often elitist. So that's kind of what these pieces are about. They're also meant to be kind of minimal for me. This is very minimal in my world. So they're kind of meditative, a meditative look at these technologies that kind of rule our lives that we interact with every day. So that's how these works made. They really came out of that experience with NFTs and having to buy Oculus and all of that. And I'll finish with my most recent show with my good friend John DeLeon Martin at a gallery called Human Resources in Los Angeles. So luckily I got to show knowing others and wanting to be known again. And I got to see people sit in the beanbag chairs and watch the video, which was so nice after COVID. And I really understood and learned, I don't know if there's any video artists in the room, but give people a place to sit. They will watch your video. Make people comfortable. What's wrong with that? People would sit in these beanbag chairs and watch the entire 20-minute video, which shocked me. So yeah, it was great to see that. And then I made a number of other digital pieces that worked really well with John's drawings and paintings, which you can see here, which we kind of installed the work together. So it looks like if I look at my timer, I have about 10 minutes, but yeah, I mean, I could go into these works, but I'd also really like to open it up for questions. What do you think, Cliff?
Yeah, questions are good.
Okay.
I have a few, but I want to allow everyone else to ask what they are thinking about in relation to your work. So if anyone has any questions, please speak up or unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just put something in the chat. I'm Jean Conkle. I just was curious if you could, especially for our students who may or may not be so familiar with the NFT idea, could you just kind of because for me, the more I read about it, the more a black hole it is. So
Yeah.
if you would be so kind as to just give us a general kind of feel for what it is.
I will do my best because it is confusing. I did it myself and I barely understand it. You are not alone in this. And that's why it's like, this is meant to be democratizing and to help artists, but it's like, if the knowledge isn't accessible, that's useless. And it only helps this sect of people who already have that access of knowledge or monetary, ability to gain that access. But I will just try to break it down as simply as possible. So NFT stands for non-fungible token, which is basically, it just means a unique artwork, right? Or a unique form of currency, but we'll think about it in artwork just to keep it simple. So if you make an artwork into an NFT, that means it is unique. There is only one. Nobody else can have it. It's literally recorded on what's called the blockchain. So it's like, if one person buys it, forever that is recorded that they own that piece. That's it. NFT just means unique digital artwork. And I mean, we could get into cryptocurrency, but it's confusing to me as well. I mean, really, it is as simple as going on to, a platform like OpenSea, and you can just upload artworks and, see if people buy it with their cryptocurrency. But yeah, it just means a unique artwork. See, I can barely explain it. But people have real success, and what's difficult about it is that you really have to do a lot of legwork yourself that galleries otherwise would do. You have to promote it. You have to get on Twitter. You have to meet other weird tech bros and talk to them and get them to be interested in your ideas. So yeah, that's kind of the best I can do on it for now.
Thank you. I had a question about the idea of what the interdisciplinary artists in the future would be like. And I was wondering if you think about that at all.
Oh, I definitely think about that. I definitely think about that because I feel like my interests are kind of, their relevance is waning. Nobody likes Instagram anymore, I really hit it at the right moment, but it's kind of, technology just moves so quickly that it's so easy for things to just drop out of relevance especially in the digital art realm. But if I were to guess what interdisciplinary art would look like in the future, I definitely see a lot of people doing really interesting things with virtual reality. And I teach a class on social media and net art, and I have students who love their Oculus and live in virtual reality worlds. Like, it's literally an episode of Black Mirror, which, like, I'm not saying that to be disparaging. I think it's as valid as the real world, right? But I think that world building in a virtual reality space will definitely be incorporated into the interdisciplinary artistic practices. And I think that as our attention spans sort of compress infinitely with our micro attention being set forth to all these different places, people continually kind of have to think about how to shorten the message. I think that, like, TikTok really influences how we engage with content, digital or otherwise. Some people might say it's unfortunate. I don't feel either way. I just think it is what it is, and we all have to adapt, but yeah, I think that our attentions are shortening. So I think that all artists kind of have to think about how to engage with people in a way that matches our new attention spans, and I think that can apply to, like, painting and ceramics and physical artistic practices as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yes, I mean, it's just interesting with how many choices artists and students have nowadays to focus. And I just wonder, from like a faculty side or versus the student side, like is how challenging that is for students to kind of wrap their head around, like, well, I want to be proficient in this media, but then I do want to experiment with this, and then it gets kind of I guess difficult to gauge sort of what success looks like as an interdisciplinary artist, and like what are you kind of held up to as like what is successful or not. But I guess that goes into aesthetics, which is a whole other minefield.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, as an instructor in that area, I will say in the beginning for students, a big part of the upward climb is figuring out the right tool, figuring out how to maneuver the tool to achieve the vision that you have, so they spend a lot of effort initially learning their way around things, right? And then are able to apply their aesthetic or their creative voice a little more efficiently when they don't have to think about the tool as much, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So sorry, I keep getting Amber Alerts for this poor little child that's been abducted. And so I'm like, stop. I don't know how to make it stop.
See, technology is supposed to help us, but
Right. That's why I keep muting myself, because I'm like, I don't know how to stop this.
Okay. I think that you make a really important point about the freedom that students get once they sort of understand a tool, but then their practice might change, their interest might change. I think that is one problem with our dispersed attentions, like to not hone in and to really learn something. The one thing the advice that I always try to give my students, whether it be in a digital art class or a drawing class or otherwise, I always say, like, your technical process should reinforce your conceptual intent. When they're like, how should I make this? I say, make the choice that aligns with the idea, which again, it's like another skill that takes a long time to sort of, like, conceptual skills are as difficult to hone in on as technical ones, but I think that, yeah, especially with digital processes, there's so many things they can engage with, and really becoming well practiced with one, like 4 years isn't even enough,
Well, I think sometimes it's the, if we want to talk about a different discipline in math, it's going from being able to do the equation to taking the word problem and solving it. It's understanding what to do with the tool, Yeah.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. How do you apply the skill?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I wanted to say, I've seen like a lot of your work like over the years, and like before this presentation, I'd never heard of you, and yeah, I'd seen this stuff, and I always kind of assumed it was like from different people, but I think you really capture like the nauseating feeling of like overconsumption of media and like social media, and it's great. But I was just gonna ask, like, are you planning on doing any like of these shows on like the East Coast and like New York or Philly?
I'm not sure exactly specifically which shows you're referring to, but yeah,
like the in-person ones. I mean, just like the displays, I guess.
For sure. Any opportunity. I mean, if you are a student, like in the art world, I feel like I almost say yes to everything. And you hope one day that will slow down, but actually I really don't think that it does, especially for someone like me who works in this maximalist sort of ideology. So yes, the opportunities I get to show on the East Coast are welcome. And it really just depends on how I'm able to get my work out there. And thank you for your kind words about my work being nauseating. I love hearing that.
Oh, I didn't mean it in like a bad way. I just,
No.
The interpretation I get from like a lot of it, is, I don't know.
I'm sorry if that sounded negative. I think that that is an extremely apt description of my work and the experience of engaging with social media. And I absolutely take it as a compliment because that is what I hope my work does. So you're right on point, Alex.
Cool.
Oh, Casey, can you unshare for?
Oh, yes. Stop share.
Okay.
There we go.
Very good. I also added for any students in the Zoom to in the chat the QR code for Bucks Plus. They get extra, students get extra credit for attending.
Nice.
Very nice. And I did take photographs, so I don't like of each slide. I don't know.
Good.
I don't know if it did record it or not, but we'll find out. I mean,
Sorry about that.
oh no, it's fine. I think it'll work out. Let's see. Does anyone else have any other questions before we bid farewell?
Thank you so much. I really learned a lot. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. It's been a pleasure.
It was great.
And so do you think, one last question I had is, do you think your work going forward, you talked about the extended video that you'd like, and so you're constantly kind of adding to that. And then the techno fetishism, do you think you'll add to that as well? Or do you think this triptych kind of says what you want in that regard?
You know, it's very rare for me to have a series of works that I don't imagine being sort of infinitely, you know, additive, but I can't really fathom adding to it unless some new weird technology comes out, which undoubtedly it will, that we all feel like we have to buy and that we think will make our lives convenient, and then it's just a pain in the ass. So that's a possibility to add to it. But yeah, I for once, I actually kind of feel like the triptych of 3 kind of works nicely and is kind of bookended. With the video work, knowing others and wanting to be known, absolutely my goal is to continue to add to it. You know, like I said, I would love for it to be like 5 hours long one day. I love the idea that just not only being in the ability to infinitely add to it, but to add to it for years so that every time I add a new episode, it reflects the popular culture of the moment, you know? Like there's scenes with the recent Bachelorette, Hannah Brown, there's scenes with like recent Real Housewives and stuff. And as it continues into the future, not only is it a reflection of me as an artist and a maker, but it's also a reflection of the culture that I'm consuming. So I love the idea of being able to do that well into the future.
Would you ever do a cameo on any of the reality show TV?
Oh, I love that you mentioned that, because when I graduated in 2020 and I was so sad because I didn't get to have my thesis show and I didn't get to walk and all this stuff, my sister got me cameos with some of the celebrities. One of them was Taylor from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And then another was this guy from the show called Are You the One, which is a little bit more obscure, that I love. And they're both like talking about me getting my MFA. And that is actually the next episode I'm gonna do, is including those cameos. Cause it's like, it'll be able to address COVID and it'll also be able to address my obsessions. And like Taylor's like, congrats on your MFA. I don't know what that is, but that's great. So yes, I would totally, if I had the funds for it, I would get more cameos, but I love the ones I already have.
That's great. Okay, well,